Thank you very much, and a good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for the second Zoom meeting or Zoom webinars this week. We had another meeting at the beginning of the week with members in the north of the county, and this evening it's the turn of yourselves in the south of the park, and we appreciate your time. As an authority, we see that our relationship with the communities are so important, and evenings such as this are part of what we're doing, and we appreciate your presence. I'll begin by asking the panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll go on the order you are on the screen. So Peter, thank you. I'm Edward Jones, and I am the head of properties for the National Park, looking after assets and property. Angela? Good evening, everybody. I'm Angela Jones, and I'm the partnerships manager for the National Parks. I'm Emyr Williams, the chief executive of the National Park. Good evening, I'm Helen Pye, I'm the head of engagement. And David. How are you? I'm David Jones, and I'm the warden for the South. I've just started the end of January. Thank you, David. And David's stepping in at the last moment because Dan can't be with us this week. So thank you, David. And I'm Wyn Jones. I'm the chairman of the park. I hope that you've had a copy of the agenda. We have several items we want to introduce to you, beginning with Emyr. There's an opportunity for you to ask questions at the end. One question's been sent in beforehand. We'll deal with that at the end of the meeting, but you're welcome to ask questions during presentations by using the chat panel or the question and answer panel. We'll be trying to keep a watch on them as we go on. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to answer after the presentations. Your name will come up, but it would be useful if we know what area, what community council you come from, so the answer can be tailored to your needs and situation. So with those few words, I'll hand you over to Emyr, who's going to give us an overview of the work of the authority. Thank you, Chairman, and welcome to you all once again. As Wyn has said, the relationship between us is very important, especially in such a challenging times as this. We've had an extremely busy year as officers and as a body as well. It started last year in the spring, and as I told the community councils in the north, I remember the Friday before the busiest weekend, Boris Johnson said, stay at home. Well, it was the opposite. It was very, very busy after he said that. So we knew we'd have a problem with people, huge numbers coming in here. So the authority decided after the weekend passed that we'd closed down everywhere to send a clear message on travelling. And of course, we did this before the requirement by law to do so. And then during the year, we opened up later on. And what we found very useful was the consultation we did with you as community councillors. We had lots of good comments about your needs as local communities. And we did our best with the advice you gave us last year. And we have a bit of an advantage over the parks in England because they were a month ahead of us. So we had seen that there were problems on the way, and we did have problems. Problems were a lot to do with numbers, people turning up to some sites. There were parking problems with rubbish and behaviour. And we saw different kind of people coming as well. which created problems. But it wasn't a problem just for us here in Snowdonia. I've been talking with colleagues throughout Europe in other national parks, and they saw the same problems, people going out to the open air and the parks, and certainly it has increased people's appreciation of areas such as Snowdonia, and it's increased our appreciation, people's appreciation locally. They were saying they could hear birds singing rather than motorbikes zooming around. So I think that was a good thing. 2021, well, we foresee another busy year, but we've done a little bit more preparation work this year, and we've been most fortunate being able to redirect resources and bring in more resources. We've had support by the Welsh Government, so have more resources to cope. An example of what we've done, we've had 5 additional officers, a communications officer, we've got arrangements in the north with traffic, as you see in the media, and cleaning, and rubbish is more of a matter, of course, but we can't cope with this on our own. So we cooperate very closely with the 2 county councils, which are in the national park, and the police as well, and that relationship has borne fruit. It's not cheap to put on these additional services, and I'm concerned already about next year, because I foresee that the arrangements that have been put in place this year are going to cost almost £400,000, and that is in order to safeguard the communities, but also in order to give the best possible experience to those who come to share Snowdonia with us. I'm sure that you're tired of hearing me talking and complaining about the financial situation. We're in a slightly better position this year. We've had additional financial support from the Welsh Government because of the work we did last year. But this time last year, we have to foresee that we make a loss of £1.3 million. We were dependent on commercial income. And a Sgwn, for example, but we've managed to break even this year. But the only way we've been able to do that, of course, is by changing the way in which we work. And sites such as Plas Tanabulch and Sgwn have had to change, and Plas Tanabulch specifically has adopted a new business plan. And unfortunately, we've had to say farewell to some member of staff in Plas Tanabulch in order to balance the books. And during the year, and at the beginning of the pandemic, we had to move very quickly to enable staff to work safely from home. And because we invested quite a lot in IT recently, we were able to do so quite easily. And staff continue to work at home, unless there's a specific reason why they go into the office. But as the summer develops, we will be moving more and more back to the office. There's presence in the office at all times. In the same way, the members have been able to meet virtually. Obviously, the regulations didn't allow virtual meetings, but once that happened, we could have the authorities meetings, planning, etc., within a month of the regulations coming out. The only thing that held us back slightly was the technology in order to get it bilingual. And if you're interested, the broadcasts are online, but we're not there yet with the technology in order to broadcast live. So that is something which will be developed as well. During the year, we've adopted 2 strategic plans. That's for the area, which is a plan for the area, not the park, the authority, that is. And we look at what we want to try and achieve in the area. And that was adopted in September of last year. And because we'd had the COVID experience and we're beginning to see the effect of Brexit, we've had to, we've been able to slightly meet those challenges. We've had a welfare plan as well, which looks at how the work of the authority itself is going to be led. And that looks more and more at external rather than internal matters of the body. Next year as well, we will be beginning on the process of reviewing our planning policies. So there will be several consultation with you as community councils about that. And again, we expect there to be changes because of the response to Brexit and to COVID. We have an empty, a vacant post. So you're having a bit of exclusive here today. I was going to say, well, it's the Welsh Government officer. Well, there's somebody moving on and there will be another post becoming vacant in the authority next year. People moving on. So as well, with the Welsh Government, last time I was talking to you 2 years ago, we were in the Environmental Department of the Welsh Government, but we went from the Environmental Department to there from local governments, but now we're with Julie James, climate change, so we still wait to see what that actually will mean for us. So just to conclude, we have plans which continue to run, and we've got schemes which have a high profile, and work is moving on. We've got a new lottery scheme with on the Carneddau, and also we've been successful, and we've had confirmation last week that we've cooperated very closely with some of the community councils, and they had acknowledged specific challenges for them locally. And we've managed to have a fund of £200,000. We're going to call it the Eryri Community Fund, and it's a fund for communities or societies to get resources which help them cope with COVID, with sustainable tourism. I don't have any more details about that this evening, but if you'll just send us a note if you have any ideas, I'd appreciate hearing them. So with those few words, thank you very much. Thank you, Emyr. I don't see any questions up until now on Emyr's presentation, so we'll move on to the second item, which is caring for the environment and the communities. David, thank you. Yes, I've stepped in at the last moment instead of Daniel, so I won't keep you very long. But as far as the warden services is concerned, the main problem this year, similar to last year, is problems such as wild camping, camper vans on site, visitors leaving rubbish, gates being kept open, and social behaviour generally. Obviously, one of the main problems during the lockdown was people breaking travelling rules, and the wardens have worked hard during this period, contacting the police and monitoring the situation generally, trying to safeguard local communities. Obviously, it's a difficult time for wardens. There were so many people around. So completing daily tasks and monitoring from day to day was difficult. We have had the public mentioning their concern about wild camping in places like Tegid Lake, Cadir Idris, just to name a few places. And the advice that wardens have been giving tourists is to use the appropriate camping sites. It's been an unusual time, of course, because the camping sites have been open for them to go there. But we just advise them not to camp in places like that. Camper vans have been a problem, rather a big problem for the wardens. Unfortunately, lots of them would come to our sites in the park again, The wardens have been advising them to use the appropriate sites and trying to get them to move on. Unfortunately, we don't have any enforcement authority for enforcement, so we can only offer them advice. One thing we have been doing is putting up signs across the park generally, and this follows inquiries by local communities. An example is in Dinas Mawddwy recently. We also work quite closely with Gwynedd Council, and we hope to put up more signs in laybys throughout the park. We're not quite sure how much effect it will have at present, but obviously we do hope that it will offer information to people who use camper vans. Recently, we've seen more people being concerned about scrambling on public footpaths with motorbikes and spoiling areas which are of special scientific interest. Obviously, it's difficult for wardens to monitor this from day to day, so we've been cooperating closely with others. There are signs which have been set along specific sites in the south, including Arenig, Sadros. They've also offered more presence on the ground, especially at weekends, because that's when we have most complaints from local communities. The role of wardens then monitoring paths, well, they continue to monitor paths and work closely with Gwynedd Council. So we still create furniture and paths generally. The wardens have been working closely on a project in Morfa Dyffryn. I don't know if you have a chance to see that, but it looks quite good. And it brings a resource to the local community in Harlech and visitors. Other projects have been put on recently. A new panel has been set in the Bala area by Llangower, Glanllyn and Tegid Lake, which educates visitors of what's available as far as culture and history of the Bala area is concerned. I'd like to underline what Emir was saying. The warden service has had 2 additional seasonal wardens in the south of the park. So we have Lizzie Richardson in the Dolgella area, and Hugh Williams are just started in the Tegid Lake area. I think the 2 seasonal wardens will be of advantage to the service. Obviously, they will have more people on the ground to educate people of the countryside code, and we hope to get the best behaviour from the people who visit the area. So that will be an advantage, I'm sure. Obviously, as Emir mentioned already, the summer is going to be a challenging time for the wardens service, and it will put quite a bit of stress on the wardens, but I hope with additional staff, it'll be possible to deal with the problems effectively. As far as other work is concerned, the warden service have completed recently, they've been working closely with local schools and Glanllyn in Bala, Arwell. The warden in the Bala area has been chatting, giving educational talks. We have other projects in the pipeline for this year as well. We hope to complete some work on the paths on Cadir Idris and look into work on other paths as well. One of the things that the wardens have adopted, they were in place last year, were area plans. So this acknowledges different opportunities within certain areas, projects which they can develop themselves, which are going to, well, they'll be of advantage, biodiversity, the environment generally, and developing a better relationship with the local community. Therefore, I'm sure there's an opportunity for us to cooperate with local communities, developing new paths which will be of advantage to local people, and welfare and mental health benefits to local residents, and they will be of advantage to local businesses by drawing more people into the area and strengthening the local economy. I think that's what I had got to say as far as an update on the warden service. Obviously, with the role of the wardens, we appreciate your feedback as community councils. If you have any concerns which you'd like to voice and share with us, you are welcome to contact me or one of the wardens at any time. Thank you, David, and thank you for stepping in. I don't see any questions at present, but if somebody does have a question, if you'll put it in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer it. So the next item is the review of the traffic parking in the Snowdon area, Bydva. No, I don't think we're covering that tonight. Oh, I've used the wrong agenda. Sorry, Angela, I gave you fright there. The next item this evening is managing car parks by Etward. Good evening, everybody. This is just a very quick summary of some changes and developments over the last year, and looking forward at our to think what we do within the south of the county. The problem which existed before COVID was the Penmine Pool parking car park. Many people park their camper vans there, and well, the number has increased following COVID, and more are people are staying in Britain. And there has been a historical problem where a large number of people were staying overnight illegally. And after having strong support locally, we cooperated and put an obstacle on this site after looking at various options of managing the situation, and it has been a success. But one thing which has become apparent after reopening and the barrier having put in place is that a high number of people are travelling around in large vehicles, high vehicles, be they vans or camper vans. A lot of people use larger vehicles to travel around daily, and so they then can't have access to the sites to park and go walking on the Mawddach path. So the lessons we've learnt is that the obstacle the barrier did answer the problem which existed, but it moved the problem to another place. So it's all important that we continue discussions before this COVID with the partners on how to deal with this, because it is a continuous problem in the Coed y Brenin area, the National Resources Wales land, etc. So we continue to cooperate, and a dialogue is continuing, and it's more important than ever with the increasing problems which have been referred to already. So we continue to hold discussions, and we deal regularly. And the last thing we want is just to move the problem to somebody else within the area. So we have to work consistently and cooperate on that. Then, as far as considering, well, some comments which David had earlier, the enforcement powers, we have been quite soft on this historically, and we've been praised for that, because people don't have a definite penalty. They just pay what they owe. We've reached a situation by now, unfortunately, because of a change in people's attitude, that we have to consider stricter options, and we are looking and considering how we strengthen these enforcement powers. So we will hold further consultation when we've got discussions, well, after having discussions on that. Then very quickly, I'll mention the work which has happened in Dol Idris. We've invested with the Welcome Wales money. There was a pot of money in order to improve facilities for users. that work has been completed, and we are grateful for the support. And there are more plans in the pipeline. We've managed to attract more money through the Welsh Government in order to make further improvements and to create a network of places to charge electric cars, charging points, and these will become more widespread in the next few years. So we're looking at developing a network of charging points in more out-of-the-way places such as Tynant, and on the Mawddach path around Cader Idris, Dol Idris, Tynant, and Croesffordd, Cymnwrch and Moel Offrwm. Those paths are very popular as well. So we are looking at getting an infrastructure there where there is no infrastructure existing already. Also, as part of those projects, we looked at upgrading facilities in Tynant and Tyn Penmaen as well. And in another important development, we've invested in machines to pay with card in the south. We have the technology in some of the sites, larger sites in the north. So we've been able to extend the technology in the south. We've got problems with communications, phone lines and broadbands. There's no phone signals in some areas. We are working to improve that. Something we saw happening, not deliberately, was people arriving in places without cash, ready money, and they hadn't seen the information available that they couldn't pay with cash, and that they could only pay with cards. And then they were afraid to have a penalty, so they'd park then on the side of a road to avoid having a penalty. Certainly, putting machines there has solved some problems, such as in Dol Idris, but another problem then is people camping overnight. So we must look at the options in order to take the pressure from the parking problems, which is on the boundary of our sites as well. So I think there are a few questions which have been asked. There are two questions which have been put up. One, the first one by Catherine Aikman about keeping people out of areas which have been fenced. I'm not sure who's going to answer that. Following David's presentation, I take it. Maybe David could answer that. Yes. Could you expand a little bit? I look into the matter for you. The Kathleen's details, we do have Kathleen's details. I'm sure if you want to answer after the meeting, yes, I'll contact her after the meeting and discuss it with her. I'm not sure if Kathy refers to private land or land which belongs to the authority. Perhaps that's a chat you can have outside the meeting. Yes, that'll be fine. Thank you. And then there's a question by Katie Price about campers and motorhomes, and asking whether it's possible to have a kind of system so that they can have designated areas, but there'll also be a charge. This has been raised, matter has been raised several times over the last year in France. Possibly this happens to a degree already on private land, especially in the north of the park, where businesses give permission for a nominal price for people to stay there, to stay if they want to eat in a restaurant, for example. Does anybody want to answer Katie's question? I'm happy to come in here. Since last year, we're beginning to see challenges, especially around the Bannau areas with motorhomes. We've been cooperating with Gwynedd Council to try and look at how we can solve the problem. There are some short term, as David mentioned, things about signs and moving people on. And I'll mention a little bit about them trying to give people information before they come. But as far as other things are concerned, Gwynedd Council has been looking, and they are discussing as a body various options. There's a lot of work which needs to be done before they can move forward with a matter such as this. They've done a lot of research work, and from what I understand from discussions, cabinet discussions, they are now looking at beginning discussions with communities to see what's possible. I don't know whether that will happening in the park area or not, but certainly it's not going to be something which happens overnight. Excuse the pun. Thank you. Emyr, yes. Pembrokeshire and the National Park are a year or two ahead of us here, and they've established a policy in their planning policy, and they've allowed yes, throughout the county, and they thought they'd solved the problem, but to tell you the truth, those sites are not being used, and the kind of people who generally use camper vans, they don't want to go to somewhere which has been developed. They want to be in the middle of nowhere, etc. So although we think, you know, we've got to understand more what the requirements of these users are. There's more work to be done on that. Thank you, Emyr. Katie, we all share your concerns, and we feel we must do something. The problem has increased substantially over the last couple of years, although it happened before then, but thank you for your question. So we'll move on now to item 4, which is sustainable tourism, and that is Helen. Thank you. And Rob is going to share slides on the screen. I'll wait for those to come up on screen. As Emyr said, last year was a huge challenge for us, and especially for other communities, especially during the period, during the lockdown and the time leading up to the time when things reopened. It was a huge concern to us about the effect this would have on communities and how we could help the situation, especially when we saw people breaking rules. And of course, any challenge is an opportunity to learn as well. And I think that one of the places where we have grown during the last year is in cooperation. Well, there was real need during the lockdown to cooperate very closely with other bodies in North Wales, the police, for example. And this sign here was something which we received help with in order to get the message up. And the police as well cooperated with us after the Wardens reported back on the problems in areas such as Bala. There was cooperation with putting signs up on roads in that area as well, just to make the message, for the message to be clear, what the regulations were, etc. So yes, it was an interesting period, and this picture was taken when the area was closed, and then as things reopened, as we heard earlier on, we had these issues, and over the whole of the park we saw challenges of things like rubbish, camper vans, especially in the south of the area, and also, well, I'm not going to call this wild camping. It's more kind of festival camping, in my opinion. But this is the kind of a thing that our wardens had to clear up last year. Next slide. So really, since that time, after the season closed, we've been doing preparation work for this season, because we've learned a lot last year. And as we reopen, there are many things which have been put in place. David has mentioned a few of them. And in my department, one element I work on is the communication, but I'll mention the volunteering side as well. Last year, as we reopened, so many people helped us as volunteers looking after the areas. And these are some of the volunteers who are out helping to gather rubbish and hand out information to people. And this year, we will be expanding on this and we've got over 80 volunteers assisting now every weekend, collecting rubbish and giving information to visitors. We also have voluntary wardens, and those schemes are being expanded yet again to be extended throughout the park and the Cadair Idris area. We also know that the communities themselves do a lot of volunteering. I've heard examples in the north of the park about the communities themselves going out and collecting rubbish, and they just want to look after their areas. And it's dreadfully frustrating on the one hand, seeing how people treat the area, and on the other hand, it's so heartening to see how the people who live there, how they love the area. And if there's something that we as a park can do to help you, if you do that kind of work, then one of my team has responsibility over managing a small fund of money for volunteers up until £500. It's an easy process to apply. And if you want any assistance for resources, such as high-vis vests or litter pickers or whatever, the list is quite lengthy, what communities do and how they volunteer. So please contact us. I'll give you the contact details at the end. So as I mentioned, we have been doing quite a bit of work on the communication side. And communication has happened not only locally, I'll mention that in a minute, but also nationally. The national parks of the UK, we all cooperate on a campaign, nationwide campaign, which can target people as they begin to visit the area. And specifically, we are trying to target new audiences which have begun to visit the park. And we saw this happening last year. And what we've seen is, I think it's fair to say that a lot of the new audiences, they haven't visited rural areas much before. Their understanding of the countryside rules is quite basic, to say the least. Our job has to change. It's a bit different trying to begin with basic messages and also trying to use the channels which they use to get their information. For example, lots of young people these days who get all their news from social media and they don't read a newspaper. So a lot of work goes on, as I mentioned, nationally and also locally by us. And all our communication is around the main issues, which we saw last year. When you think about it in a way as, well, what we do is try to support the work of the wardens. So we try to influence people before they visit the area and as they visit. And then the wardens, poor things, have got to try and deal with the people after they arrive. So our campaign this year, there were 3 things we were looking at. This is a result of what we saw last year: planning, discovering, and loving. Planning is about trying to get people to plan beforehand. For example, booking somewhere to stay before they arrive if they come in a camper van, rather than thinking it's fine to stay in a lay-by. The discovering, well, really emphasizing what's special about the Eryri area. It's not just about the adrenaline rush and going on the zip wire. There are so many things that people can see in this area. The language, heritage, And we try and encourage visitors as well to learn a bit of Welsh when they visit. And then the third one is loving. That is trying to get people to think they visit a national park where the communities are a core to what makes the area special. And they think of that, and they think of respecting the area and the environment and the people. So our objectives, what we are trying to achieve, just some examples here. We influence when and where people visit. So this is the kind of information we put out on social media, simple things. This is an example of Penna Pass. We've got some other places as well, which shows people that weekends are very busy. So it's better to visit during the week. And I hope that will help businesses as well, where there's no capacity at weekends, but perhaps there is during the week. And that then is relevant also for visitors coming in September rather than midsummer. The second objective then is to get more people to plan ahead before they travel in order to reduce parking and fly camping issues. Then we try and we spend money as well on targeting specific cities, which we know people, its residents visit Snowdonia area regularly. So we try and get this information to them before they visit. And we just want to emphasize to people, book beforehand rather than just turn up. The third objective then is we try and encourage positive and respectful behavior, and we use examples of good practice. Then we also emphasize how to behave in the countryside. And also we mention all the good work that goes on, the wardens, volunteers, and we'd be delighted as well to show what the communities do. So if you have the photos which you can share with us, that would be wonderful. Because I think we just need to show people how much the local people put in to looking after this area. I think that's an effective way of giving people the feeling that they need to behave respectfully. So it's a slightly different approach, but in a more positive way of trying to influence behavior. And what we've learned is, well, people have had a year and a half of getting messages, do this, don't do that, follow the rules. So the challenge now is to influence behavior, and people have had enough maybe of being preached at. So this positive approach maybe, or these are good things you can do, we think that can be more effective. So here are a few examples. We launched the campaign mid-March, and here are some figures we're hitting at present. So impressions, those are the number of people who've seen the information we've handed out, almost 2 million. Then link clicks, the number of people who've clicked on a link or something we put online. Then the engagements, the number of people who have pressed like or share. And there we are, in a way. Perhaps just a few things I should add on the wild camping. Other things we do, well, we've been contacting a company called Park the Night. Perhaps some of you will have heard about them. It's an online website where people give information. They share information themselves about places where you can camp or camp in a camper van. And if you go on the website and see a map of Snowdonia, you will see that people have noted a lot of places where you can camp overnight in Snowdonia. We've been contacting Park the Night and asked them to take places down where there are problems or where people should not be camping. And it's very easy to contact the company Park the Night directly, But if you want any assistance or if you want to discuss anything with us, the team can help with that. And that is it from me. Thank you, Wyn. Thank you, Helen. We've had one question from Iestyn. I don't know if you had the chance to see it, Helen, and how much effect does the messages get in cities you mentioned earlier? Well, possibly, Iestyn can ask that before I showed the last slide, but we also are monitoring weekly to see what the click-through and how many people see things. And we use that in order to adapt the messages as we go along. So if we see a message being effective and having more traction, we do more of that stuff. So as I say, we learn on a weekly basis, and we also have a weekly meeting with staff and wardens who are out there. And in the real world rather than the digital world, and it's useful for us because we have information then about what the issues are, and then we can adapt and put more emphasis on those issues in our messages. Also, in the meeting on Tuesday, some of the communities mentioned the problems they've been having with more dogs and people not keeping their dogs on leads. So we will be doing more work on that during the next few weeks. Thank you, Helen. I'm not sure whether I misunderstood Iestyn's message, but I understood him to be asking what areas do the people come from? Are they people from, where in Wales or from outside? Well, yes. What we can do from our side is if we want to pay to put that information to people, and it's not very costly, then we can target specific areas, and then we see from that how much hits and clicks it gets. For example, we could target places like Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, because we know a lot of our visitors come from those areas. Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Iestyn. There aren't any more questions. For those of you who are disappointed that you haven't heard about transport and traffic in the park, you can hear now about the ambassadors plan. Angela? Thank you. Great. And Rob is going to share some slides here. So yes, the Eryri ambassadors plan. I'm very glad to be working on this scheme. What is an Eryri ambassador? Well, it's a training program for businesses in the tourism sector in order to enable owners and staff to educate visitors on the unique characteristics of the area. And of course, that in its turn will bring respect and give fulfilling experience for visitors. But we want to go a step further here in Eryri, and we want to offer this training to anybody who wishes to be an ambassador for the area. And that is why we have developed a comprehensive program which will be beneficial to everybody who lives and works in Eryri and the wider area. So over the lockdown, we wrote and, we contacted a lot of people in the area to begin and get the contents. And so the next slide, Rob. This program is all online now, and everybody who registers on it has to complete 3 compulsory modules to become a bronze ambassadors. These you can see on your screen at the moment. But there are 9 others available, which cover every one of the virtues of the national park. So a reason for our allegation as a national park 70 years exactly ago to this year. Next slide, you can see if you complete 6 of these modules online, you become a silver ambassador. And if you complete 9, then you become a gold ambassador. So the contents of the modules vary, and the quality and the caliber of the people who take part, well, is extremely high. People like Marwyn ap Dafydd, Dr. Angharad Price, Iolo Williams, Cassie, who has written a song, an original song for this scheme, which is amazing. And so a lot of people in the area and in the country really have been a part of it. A lot of our staff from the authorities give as well. And as you can see, everybody receives a certificate in digital form, and then a sticker and a badge through the post. But if you become a gold ambassador, you do have a certificate through the post as well. Next slide, you can see how some of our ambassadors promote the fact that they have completed the scheme. We have over 500 ambassadors by now, which is amazing. And we have had very positive feedback about the contents. But obviously, we are open to hear ideas from ambassadors or from anybody really on any new contents or new modules as the scheme expands. And we are very eager to hold workshops and events when the time will allow us to do so. We cooperate on this scheme with other local authorities in the area. So in the end, this will be a part of the North Wales Ambassador Scheme. So we are working at the moment with Denbighshire County Council, Conwy, Flint, Gwynedd, and in the last meeting, Anglesey was there, and Wrexham as well. And in the last meeting, there were representatives from Ceredigion and Carmarthen who'd attended because they'd heard about this programme, and they'd shown interest in knowing what was going on here in North Wales. So yes, every one of those authorities, well, were interested, and hopefully it will help us all to convey messages regularly to people who are part of these schemes. So next slide. This is the online address. And thank you if you have already become an ambassador or if you've contributed in any way to this scheme. And if you have the time, well, then how about becoming an honorary ambassador? Thank you. Thank you, Angela. I can see no questions, but you're most welcome to ask during the next few minutes after the meeting. But before we go to the next item, which is the question and answer session, well, I would be interested in knowing what you think of this format. Do you have any comments? So do you like meetings such as this kind of style webinar, or Zoom or not? If you just put something in the chat, your opinion about the format of this evening or the question and answer. So a question which has come to hand is, I take it that other members haven't seen the question. I'll read it as it is, word for word here. It's a question by Councillor Eryl Jones-Williams, Dyffryn Ardudwy, and he's now quoting, asking question in English.
This has resulted in poor service by the mobile phone companies. Will the SNP be allowing high masts in future and informing mobile phone companies?
Thank you very much for that question, Eryl. Emyr, will you answer this? Yes, thank you, Eryl. Unfortunately, Eryl, I can't see you in this format. So may I ask you a question if you can answer it in chat? Obviously, you are concerned about communications in the park. Just a quiz to finish. How many planning applications do you think the authority has passed in the last 5 years on telecommunication masks? 0 to 10, 10 to 30, or 30 to 50, or more than 50? I don't know, Eryl, if you're there, write your answer in chat, because the answer perhaps will Well, you'll see. In the question, there's a statement under question. The statement is 15 meters, and I don't think that's technically correct any longer. And we do meet the telecommunications companies quite regularly. We have two policies which control this, the planning policy, and that policy is quite clear that we as an authority support telecommunication development in the park as long as we respect the landscape. We've mentioned respecting nature, communities, we've got to do so to the landscape as well. Now then, and as well, we want as well to encourage telecommunications operators to use some infrastructure which is suitable to the landscape. Nobody's answered my question. Well, I'll give you the statistics in that case. Right. As Ariel referred to 15 meters, there's quite a few masts which are more than 15 meters in Eryri than they were 10 years ago. Ariel, have you put something in the chat? I've seen something. Ariel has put some, thank you. Thank you, Ariel. Right, in the last 5 years, we've considered 71 planning applications or of applications from masts, and that statistic is surprising. Out of those 71, 41 applications were for brand new masts, and the rest were for upgrading present masts. 12 of the masts which have been recommended are over 15 meters, and one, which is in Ganllwyd, is 40 meters, and one in Cwmpen Machno, which is 25 meters, and only one application has been refused. So I think that we work well with the telecommunication sector, especially from my experience and the staff. The communications that are altered, talking with communities, maybe companies, it's easy for them to blame us about some things, but when you sit down with them, and we do so often, technical and commercial matters are detrimental to development, and planning isn't an obstacle, isn't the greatest obstacle for them. So the landscape of because of the low number of people living here contribute perhaps towards it's the reason why some people don't want to provide some companies don't provide better networks. So I don't know if that answers your question, Ariel. Email me if you want more information, but certainly we are supportive. Lots of applications have been approved in the last 5 years, and we still are approving some for the future. Thank you. Thank you, Emir. I hope that answers your question, Ariel. Thank you, Katie, for the comments. We've had 2 questions that have just arrived. Griffith Price, which is referring to parking. I'm not sure who's going to answer this. Angela, maybe? I'll refer to this to start with. It's a fair question to ask. If we see more people coming, we should have more provision. But what we have learned is that it's important to message people, to encourage them to come in the quieter periods, because what we've got to be aware of, there are plenty of facilities, 90% of the time. It's only for about a month in a year where everywhere is chock-a-block and over capacity when the weather is fine. When we got bank holidays or school holidays, there are some times where everywhere, not just the park areas, our villages and towns on the coast as well, they've been taken over by visitors who come in. So it's not sustainable for us to create more car parks which are going to be empty or not to be used for 90% of the time. So we are looking at models where we can use and screen quite sensitively additional places for overflow. That is adding on to the present facilities, and that should be planned and shouldn't cause traffic problems in other places. But certainly we cannot provide enough because nobody can control the weather, and people travel far more freely these days. There are more people visiting as day trippers. It would be quite impossible to provide enough provision everywhere. But as I said, we must weigh up and respond to problems where there are traffic problems. Well, we've got the planning policy, then can provide for making provisions where necessary and bearing in mind road safety as well. Thank you, Edward. I see that Emir has put his hand up. Oh, yes, I just wanted to add that obviously we have this pilot project in the north of the park. That is the term of tourism, sustainable tourism, which acknowledges how many people come into the area, and we try and manage the situation in a better way and in a radical way and an exciting way. So obviously, if we see that that is how, well, see how that develops over the next few years, and hopefully, if it will be successful, we will be looking at rolling it out over the rest of the park. Thank you, Angela. Emir? Yes, there are two examples where creating parking spaces have solved and failed to solve problems. In Cwm Cywar, for example, Dinas Mawddwy, they're providing a car park solved parking problems in the north of the park. A recent example is the Gwethin car park, where we had a substantial problem with the local communities. Ambulance couldn't go through, road blocked, etc. So after working with the communities, we decided to almost double the size of the car park. And there were huge costs. And then after the first weekend, as Edward said, the problem was back. All they'd done was attract more cars there, and people were still parking on the roads, so the problem is still there. So car parks in themselves can't solve the problems. The problem, you need to step back some time and analyse the problem. Thank you. Thank you, Emir. Helen? Just to agree with what Angela said there, we are doing exciting work at present, and the work which Griffith doing is important. So what is too much or what is enough? So we are looking at how we measure tourism, and the measure at present is in an annual report called STEAM, which sees how much money comes from tourism. And what we are looking at here is we're looking at the true effect of tourism, and we'll be looking at measuring things such as what is the local population and what are the numbers of visitors, because if you've got a small population, such as Eryri, the effect of 6 million people visiting, you know, is much worse than 6 million people visiting a city. So we'll be asking for the opinion of local communities, how tourism affects them. And and as well, the level of rubbish. And what this will enable us to do is to make decisions in the future. Are things improving or are they getting worse? And where do we want to put our efforts and see it will influence how we market the area as well? Thank you. Thank you for the comments, the additional comments by Iestyn. Thank you very much. And thank you as well to Errol for the comment about how the staff of the authority dealt with the visitors last year under very difficult circumstances. Errol is praising it, and I, as a chairman, thank you, and the staff appreciate that comment as well. There are no more questions. It's 8:10. Thank you for your presence. And thank you to Edward, Angela, Emir, David, and Helen for your presentations. And more importantly, thank you for being present. We're a small authority, and we can't achieve half of what we do alone. We can only achieve through cooperation with our partners, and you as Community Council are an essential part of that. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your support.